10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 357. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 357 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. It's the last episode of the month, so you know what that means. We're going to do our Tune of the Month episode, and this time we're going to revisit a tune. This might be the first time that we've done this throughout all the episodes that we've put out of this show, but we're going to go back to a tune called Solar by the great Miles Davis. We did this all the way back in episode 100 something, but this tune is going to be perfect for what we want to talk about today. But before we jump into the show, just wanted to remind you that this is a listener-supported podcast. No ads on the show except for this one. Instead, we rely on listeners just like you to support the show, keep it coming out in high quality week in and week out. And for your small monthly donation, you do get a PDF and audio examples and all kinds of really cool jazz education materials in return. You can find out more information and become a supporter of the show by going to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners, or you can go to patreon.com and simply search for the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Either one of those will work perfectly. I want to give a quick shout out to some new patrons this week. Thank you to our new $5 patrons, Darren and Heiko. Thank you so much for joining up to the family. And of course, for everybody who's been supporting us for months and years at this point, thank you. We could not do this without you. So again, patreon.com, search for 10-Minute Jazz Lesson, or 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners. All right, so let's jump into today's episode. So we've been talking about odd time signatures, but if you recall, part one of our series on odd time signatures had nothing to do with odd time signatures. And that's kind of what our focus is going to be on today. We talked about some non-even rhythms over an even time signature, and that's what we're going to use Solar as a vehicle for today, is we're going to revisit some of those kind of clave-like patterns. And even though this tune is in 4/4, this might be the hardest etude that I've ever written in the entire history of the show. With all of those etudes that I've put out there, I think this one might be the most challenging. And it's because of the rhythm. Rhythm is sort of like the infinite part of this music. I spoke about that in one of the previous episodes. Is like, we've been using the same 12 notes, right, for almost 100 years now in jazz, and hundreds of years in Western music. But rhythm is sort of that frontier that just keeps going. It just keeps getting deeper. So obviously when we make the rhythm harder, that's what really provides the challenge for us, and that's what really opens the doors for us, and that's what's really going to turn us into amazing musicians. So that's kind of what we're focusing on today. But before we dive in, let's go over the form of Solar and just kind of see what makes the harmony tick before we dive into the etude. All right, so Solar is a 12-bar form, and it is in the key of C concert minor. And it's a very interesting form because in the course of these 12 bars, it really goes to a lot of different places, and it's constantly modulating. And there's some really, really interesting things happening in this tune that we'll talk about in a second here. So the first chord that we see already tells us, hey, this is going to be a pretty interesting tune, because instead of just a regular minor 7 chord or a minor 6 chord, what we actually have is a C minor major 7. Which is a great, great tension-filled chord. And it already puts us a little bit on edge, like, oh, this tune is going to be really, really interesting, which I love. Now, some people will argue that this chord is just a regular minor 7 chord or a minor triad or a minor 6 chord, but I've always played it and I've always learned it as being that minor major 7. The note is in the melody, which also helps to sort of create that sound. But just know that you'll see it on lead sheets, or if you learn it from somebody else, they might say, hey, it's just a regular minor chord. I love playing it as a minor major 7. Most of the people that I play with play it as a minor major 7. So there's my thoughts on the controversy of whether it's minor major 7 or regular minor chord. Okay, so we get 2 bars of that one chord. And And then what we do is we start a 2-5 to the key of concert F major. So G minor 7 to C7 to F major. And now we're firmly in the key of F major. We do 2 bars of that. Then that major chord becomes a minor 7 chord, which becomes the 2 of a major key a whole step down. So now we have a 2, 5 in the key of E flat major. Okay, so now we find ourselves in bar 9 of the 12 bar form. And this is what I think makes the tune really interesting. The harmonic rhythm changes so that the chords start going by twice as fast. So what we've had is either 1 chord every 2 bars or 1 chord per bar up until this point. And now that we are in bar 9 and we're in this key of E flat major, we start seeing everything go faster. So now we're going to go to the key of D flat major, but we're going to get there twice as fast. Okay? Then we land in the key of D flat, and then we play a 2-5 back to that key of C minor, and we're right back at the top. Okay? So a really, really interesting form. It goes through a lot of different keys in a really, really short period of time. It goes from C minor to the key of F major, to the key of E flat major, to the key of D flat major. So that is 4 keys in 12 bars. A lot going on there. All right. Let's listen to the whole thing all the way through. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Really interesting tune, right? It's not super complicated, but it's pretty genius the way that Miles uses that harmonic rhythm and sort of recreates like a blues sound, but is going through all these different keys. It's kind of like a modified minor blues, which is really interesting. But you can analyze it a little bit further. What I want to focus on is the rhythm. So if we take a look at the etude from this week, one of the things you're going to notice is that I went all the way back to episode 1, where we were talking about those kind of clave-like rhythms that were over even time signatures. And I tried to use those, a mixture of those as much as possible. So what you're going to notice is that note-wise, this isn't really that hard, but rhythm-wise, it is all over the place. You know, the first chorus is based off of a bunch of those sort of Brazilian clave rhythms. The second chorus gets into a little bit more of a triplet-y kind of 12/8 feel. And then the third chorus really, really leans on that 12/8 kind of different clave patternistic thing. A lot of articulation in this, a lot of rhythmic flexibility that you really need in order to be able to play this etude. So don't think that this one's going to be about notes. You're really, really going to have to sit there and work out all of these crazy rhythms that are going by. So in that way, this is a very, very different etude from what I normally write for my etudes. Usually I'm focused a lot on like some harmonic concept or something like that. This one is all about rhythm, and for that reason, you're probably going to have to work on it in a very different way. All right, let's check out what the etude sounds like. So you can hear it's just all about rhythm. And it sounds a little bit, schizophrenic, a little random, and that's kind of the way I wanted it because I was trying to fit a lot of stuff in there. This is not the height of musical expression. It's a study. It's a study in rhythm and rhythmic flexibility. And that's really going to help us as we go into next month and we start looking at, odd time signatures and then eventually finish up with an etude over a 5/4 or 7/4. I haven't really decided yet, but that is going to be where we're going. So I want you to take something in a familiar key. You're going to keep hearing me coming back to this, taking something familiar and making it slightly less so by changing up the rhythm, by doing something that we don't normally do, by challenging us in some way. So let me know if you have any questions. Hope you enjoyed this. Remember, you can get the etude, the backing track, the audio examples, all that stuff over on our Patreon site. You can find that by going to 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners, or going to patreon.com and searching for the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Thank you to everybody who's supporting the show, and thank you to all of you for listening. We will see you next time with another episode. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.